In this video about mundane astrology, we explain to you the upcoming conjunctions of Pluto, Saturn and Jupiter in Capricorn in 2020. In January, the conjunction of Saturn and Pluto takes place. Jupiter and Pluto even meet 3 times in April, June and November. What do these conjunctions mean for current events, and what prognosis can we derive from these astrological constellations? In this context, we address some social and political issues, such as the US election campaign and climate protection. This video will also deal with a great conjunction in Aquarius on December 21st, 2020, and how this could relate to the age of Aquarius. Brotherhood of the Eternal Light, teaching the Western mysteries. Mundane Qabbalistic Astrology. The conjunctions of Pluto, Saturn and Jupiter in the sign of Capricorn in 2020. Let's start with the Pluto-Saturn conjunction. It will take place on January 12, 2020 at 22 degrees Capricorn. What is the general meaning of this constellation? Pluto conjunct Saturn means that the astrological principle of destiny, Saturn, merges with the principle of radicalism, Pluto. This conjunction is often seen as an indicator of wars or revolutions, because there is a tendency to deal violently with existing conflicts. Well, in Capricorn the planets are not bad, Saturn is even in its domicile. We can therefore also derive positive interpretations in which the planets can express their virtues. The planetary powers are colored by a positive and constructive ambition and striving, Capricorn. We can imagine that the ideals and their unconditional accomplishment are pursued with determination and seriousness. This may express itself as a fateful commotion, Saturn, of idealistic striving, Pluto, and concentration on the essence, Saturn, of the idealistic and uncompromising striving, Pluto. The ideals are realized with discipline, seriousness and radicalism. The superfluous will be cut off, Saturn. The ideals are implemented concretely and purposefully. A Pluto-Saturn conjunction takes place every 30 to 36 years. In the past, Saturn-Pluto conjunctions could often be seen in connection with prominent and fateful turning points in world history. For example, on October 4th and November 1st, 1914, during the outbreak of World War I, Pluto-Saturn conjunctions took place in Cancer, the sign in which Saturn is in its detriment or exile. On August 11th, 1947, shortly after the beginning of the Cold War, Saturn and Pluto were in conjunction in Leo, another sign in which Saturn is in its exile. About 2 weeks before this conjunction, the USA founded 2 central administrative bodies in connection with the Cold War, namely the CIA and the NSA. The last Pluto-Saturn conjunction in Capricorn took place on January the 3rd in 1518, that is 2 months after Martin Luther had posted his 95 Theses on the portal of the All Saints Church in Wittenberg on October 31st in 1517, thus marking the beginning of the Reformation and early modern period. Let's now have a look at the astrological prognosis for the Saturn-Pluto conjunction on January 21st in 2020. As we already know, Saturn-Pluto conjunctions often mark prominent and fateful turning points. Since Saturn is in its domicile in Capricorn and therefore stands well, and Pluto is neutral in Capricorn, we can probably hope for positive events. In addition, this conjunction is even fourfold because Sun and Mercury are also present on January 12th as activating factors. Mercury stands for language, communication, and truthfulness and sincerity of thought, and we can comprehend the Sun as an expression of the essence or purpose of a nation, which is politically determined. Both planets are neutral in Capricorn and can be understood as activating factors of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. Thus on 12th of January, not only fate and discipline, Saturn, and the idealistic striving and determination of Pluto are united, but also the expression of the essence or purpose of a nation, Sun, and the truthfulness or sincerity of thought and communication, Mercury, are colored by Capricorn, thus by ambition and striving for achievement. This is a clear and unambiguous fourfold constellation that could develop much power for a positive ethical change. In the USA, President Trump's impeachment procedure will still be on the agenda in January, and from February until June, the presidential primary elections and caucuses will take place in the various states, before the general election takes place in November. Relevant foreign issues are still in Mexico, Russia, Syria, China, North Korea. Ukraine is also a subject because of the impeachment proceedings, since Trump is alleged to have bribed the Ukrainian government, and it is still unclear whether or to what extent Russia may have manipulated Trump's election at that time, or whether there were further complications with Russia. Trump has made himself vulnerable and often been criticized for his controversial and unethical behavior, but has been able to assert himself so far. Maybe the impeachment could lead to a dramatic turning point, which is what many hope for, since Trump has already challenged fate far too often. Let's now turn to the Pluto-Jupiter conjunctions, which will take place at different points of time in 2020. Let's first have a look at the general meaning. In a conjunction of Pluto and Jupiter, Pluto, signifying radicalism, conjoins with sovereignty and worldviews, Jupiter. The astrological principle of Pluto's uncompromising pursuit of the best and perfection unites with the order, values, and the political and religious views of Jupiter. A transformation takes place which is based on values, or we might witness the destruction and renewal of patterns of belief in order to develop new idealistic worldviews. Thus, new political and/or religious or ethical rules will emerge. The old order dies, a new one is born. In the sign of Capricorn, where Jupiter is in its fall, we can expect the uncompromising search for perfection of Pluto to be expressed by stubborn, ambitious, greedy, selfish or opportunistic values, possibly also by the abuse of power, or tyranny and fanaticism. Let us now proceed with the prognosis of the conjunctions of Jupiter and Pluto in 2020. Let us begin with the first conjunction, which takes place on April 5th in 24 degrees Capricorn. Let us look at the most important planetary constellations at this point in time, that is, the phase of conjunction. While Jupiter and Pluto are still in Capricorn, Saturn is at this point in the sign of Aquarius for some time, that is, fate or discipline and self-restraint are colored by liberty and human rights. All the planets are in direct motion that day. On April 5th, Mercury is in conjunction with Neptune in Pisces, the sign of devotion and turning inward. Mercury is in exile and in fall there, which means thinking and communication, Mercury, express themselves unfavorably, that is, by dishonesty, mendacity or confused thinking. Or a loss of reality may occur, the problem of Pisces. Neptune in Pisces is in its domicile and stands in a positive sense for visions and imagination as well as devotion to the higher spiritual forces. Through this conjunction there could be a short-term unfavorable influence, dreaminess, illusions, delusional fantasy, Neptune, or loss of reality, Pisces. Maybe Mercury will be able to give an activating impulse to Neptune, which has been in Pisces since 2011. In April, the primary elections will have been running since February and throughout June. These are mainly internal party elections. Due to the long election period, the early election dates are especially important, as the influence of the later voting states is not that great anymore. There may be developments regarding the candidates in which the great determination of Pluto is combined with the negative aspects of Capricorn, such as stubbornness or greed, or the unfavorable aspects of Jupiter, such as opportunism, narrow-mindedness, blind obedience, hypocrisy, or tyranny, to form unfavorable combinations, such as electoral fraud, deception, or bribery, or weakness to resist any of those. Also, the unfavorably positioned Mercury may produce effects such as dishonesty, mendacity, or loss of reality. At the time of producing this video in December 2019, the field of candidates for the presidential election in November 2020 is still large. By April, this might have changed. The Democrats are hoping for the presidency, while the Republicans will have to deal with the question of a possible successor for Trump, depending on how he weathers the impeachment. Things look rather bad for him at the moment. He might remain president as his party backs him, at least for now, but he may not be justifiable in a new election. With this astrological constellation, we may perhaps experience a power struggle in April rather than a renewal among the Republicans. Let's now have a look at the next conjunction of Jupiter and Pluto, which takes place on June 30th in 2020 at 24 degrees Capricorn. Within the triple Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, we have now reached the retrograde phase in which the planetary powers are usually somewhat more difficult to handle. Saturn is also retrograde and still in Aquarius. This means all the slow-moving planets are retrograde, except Uranus in Taurus, which is in fall. Thus, Neptune is also retrograde, and so is Mercury, which is meanwhile neutral in Cancer, which means that both of them may have a similar effect to the one on April 5th, although probably weaker. The US primary elections have ended, and first trends have become visible. Now we will see how the USA deals with it. The time quality is still difficult with Jupiter in its fall and in combination with Pluto's great determination. This may lead to new unpleasant struggles for power and new scandals, or both may continue. Probably we may expect from Trump's side further or even worse problems regarding domestic and foreign affairs, in addition to the already well-known ones, or ones with even worse effects, since the planetary powers are likely to be even more unpredictable because of their retrograde motion. Moreover, Trump could now be under even more pressure because of both impeachment and elections. And he might become even more incalculable and thoughtless towards the end of his presidency than ever before. Several Republican politicians might still fear Trump's backing by the electoral base in the past, which still might hamper the party's renewal. The current astrological constellation will be rather unlikely to help in clarifying this situation. Let's now also have a look at the prognosis for the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction on November 12th in 2020 at 22 degrees Capricorn. We experience the third and last Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, a constellation which was present in April, June and now November, thus throughout the whole year, and which effectively accompanied the American election campaign. Saturn has returned to Capricorn, and unlike in June, with 5 retrograde planets, there are now only 3, Mars in Aries in its domicile, Uranus and Neptune. For the first time, Jupiter and Pluto form an aspect in this third conjunction, namely a sextile with the Sun in Scorpio, where it stands neutral. A sextile is a favorable influence which can have an activating effect on the conjunction. We may consider the Sun as an expression of the essence or purpose of a state, which is colored here by the sign of Scorpio and thus could release hidden potentials and inner energies. Such an activation could express itself in a radical way, Scorpio, and cause a transformation or renewal that would probably not be based on good values, Jupiter in fall, but might perhaps be based on slightly better values than before due to the positive influence of the sextile. The presidential election on November 3rd is now more than 1.5 weeks over. The state majorities resulting from this election will determine the Electoral College, which is expected to elect the president and vice president on December 12th. Will we experience any surprises or surprising revelations on or about November 12th regarding the election or presidential candidates? Will the values of the American people be able to recover a little? How will Trump's electoral base react to the election results and recent developments? I think we can look forward to the future in suspense. Fridays for Future. We now have a brief look at one more topic, the Fridays for Future movement. The Saturn-Pluto conjunction on January 12th may mark a prominent fateful turning point here as well. Because of the good or neutral position of both planets, we can probably hope for positive events. Nevertheless, the 3 Jupiter-Pluto conjunctions could become very challenging indeed. From the climate protector's point of view, it has long been the case, as Jupiter suggests in Capricorn, even though it has only been there since December 3rd, 2019, that wrong values such as greed and stubbornness, for instance of industry and lobbyism, or weakness and opportunism of politicians and voters, as well as hypocrisy have been implemented despite the increasing number of environmental disasters, global warming and rising sea levels. Scientists, critics, and especially young people are demanding that the agreed climate targets be met, and they seem to have another difficult year ahead of them because in 2020, these unsustainable values, Jupiter in fall in Capricorn, will be joined by Pluto's determination, which may even worsen the conflict. Probably it will be a difficult year before, hopefully, there will be a turning point with a great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn on December 21st in 2020, the winter solstice, a turning point which hopefully will bring improvements for all and which I wish for all of us. Let's now turn our attention to this great conjunction on 21st of December 2020. Jupiter and Saturn move from Capricorn to Aquarius, where they form their great conjunction at less than 1 degree Aquarius on 21st of December. A so-called great conjunction, that is, the precise conjunction of the planets Jupiter and Saturn in one sign, takes place only about every 2 decades. The great conjunctions have been observed and documented since ancient times and in the Middle Ages, and have been regarded as a special and sometimes drastic astrological influence. In a great conjunction, the worldview and sovereignty, Jupiter, conjoins with destiny, Saturn. What is the issue on a great conjunction taking place on December 21st in 2020? By the approach of the 2 planets up to 1 degree in Capricorn and the following conjunction in Aquarius, we experience the general development and tendency to move from a value system limited to and focused on material values and resources, Capricorn, to ideas which are oriented towards liberal impulses and transpersonal interests. This cycle may well be a defining quality for the next 2 decades until the next great conjunction. In addition, we are in an air sign cycle that will continue for about 180 more years, until about the beginning of the 23rd century, because the next great conjunctions will take place in the 3 air signs, Libra, Gemini and Aquarius. The basic qualities of speed and intellectual agility, as well as independence and its mediating quality, which are assigned to the air element, will therefore be present as overall themes and, in accordance with their nature, will manifest themselves and be experienced as a fateful manifestation in the worldviews of humankind and in the systems of government. What else is special about the great conjunction on 21st December in Aquarius? Through the quality of the air element, as we are in an air cycle of great conjunctions as mentioned above, as well as the ideals of the sign of Aquarius and the peculiarity of the course of the coming great conjunction, we also find an indirect reference to a connection with the beginning Aquarian age. From a spiritual point of view, we are currently in a transition phase from the Piscean age to the Aquarian age. While the Piscean age was about the development of religiosity in the context of the sacrificed god, here we find figures like Osiris, Balder and Jesus, the Aquarian age is about a more philosophical spiritual impulse of freedom and individuation of humanity. We plan to present to you all the details of the great conjunction taking place at the end of 2020 and our estimates and prognosis in more detail in another video next year, that is 2020. We might also take up the subject of the age of Aquarius in a separate video next year. If you are interested in these video topics, feel free to write us in the comments. We would love to see you back on our channel soon. We are looking forward to your subscription and your thumbs up. Oh, and by the way, if you like our contents and would like to study with us, please enroll to our free online course. See you soon!